Welcome to St Andrew's Church on Sunday, the 19th of December. Today we are going to be looking at John's Gospel, John chapter 1, verses 1 to 14. So you might like to have that bit of the Bible open so you can follow along. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person this morning, but at least we can gather virtually. So I will be coming to you from the screen, so to speak. The question I want to start with this morning is, if you bumped into someone in the street who had never heard of Christmas before, could you explain to them what Christmas was without using the words Mary, Joseph, baby, manger, shepherd? Could you do that? John in this passage talks about Christmas for 14 verses, and he doesn't mention any of these words. And that's because he's not trying to answer the question, what happened on the first Christmas Eve? He's trying to answer the question, what does it all mean? What does Christmas really mean? And that's what I want to look at today, this week before Christmas. When you open John's Gospel, it looks very different from Matthew's Gospel or Luke's Gospel, who describe the history of the Christmas account. John's Gospel, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. It sounds quite confusing and a little bit formally clumsy. What is this Word and its relationship to God? We can go round the houses. But in order to understand all this, we have to do a little bit of background work. What do you expect to get for Christmas this year? What do you expect to get for Christmas this year? Did you have a wish list? Did you write to Santa? I've discovered something a few weeks ago, which I really wanted for Christmas. It's called the Jesus Toaster. It's on your screen now. And can you imagine having one of these in your kitchen? Yeah? It remind you every morning, our daily bread. Isn't it wonderful? You like that? Yeah? I wanted one of these on my Christmas wish list. And can you imagine opening this gift on Christmas morning? It would be a little square box under your tree, a little cardboard box, and you'd unwrap it, and then you'd be the cardboard on the outside, and then you'd open the box, and inside you'd find the toaster itself, okay? But you'd also find a little booklet that went with the toaster. And that inside that little booklet, you'd call it the manual, would tell you how to use the toaster properly and in a safe way. You might find cautionary clauses like, do not place the toaster near the bath, or you might meet Jesus sooner than you thought you would, etc., etc. And this whole manual would give you the purpose of the toaster. Do not smash it with a hammer, but use it. How would you use this toaster, and how would you use it safely? The meaning and the purpose of the toaster. And actually you can apply that to just about everything that you open this Christmas. You'll have some sort of designer's blueprint for the product that you have in its box, the manual, and then actually on the box of the thing that you open is often a logo, and that logo sums up everything that the manufacturer stands for, or the spirit of the organization who made the product. Like the Amazon, you'll have the little smile there, and that sums up what Amazon means, the logo, you see. Now, if we want to understand John's passage a little bit better, you need to know that as far back as the 5th century BC, Greek philosophers studied the natural world, and they saw order and they saw harmony, and they believed that there was a creative agent behind it all. And they also believed that there was a kind of cosmic blueprint to the universe that could be discovered. And they called this cosmic blueprint, wait for it, the Logos. The Logos, or if you like, the logo of the whole universe. One contemporary philosophy textbook defined the word logos as the impersonal, harmonious, divine structure of the cosmos as a whole. I know that's quite highfalutin language, but just work with me here for a moment. In other words, the reason and the meaning for everything in the universe, the theory of everything. And these Greek philosophers believed that if you could align your life with this logos, you could tap into it, connect into it, and that would mean a successful life. That would mean ultimate meaning and purpose for you. And they knew it existed, and they were all searching for it, but the problem was that they couldn't agree on how exactly you found it. You had the Stoics who believed in self-control. They were at the one end of the spectrum. And then you had hedonists who were at the other end of the spectrum, and the life and soul and the party. That was the best way to get the most out of life, just party hard. And you had the Epicureans who didn't believe in an afterlife. And then you had the Platonists who believed that when we died, we shed our mortal coil and drifted off into the ether, and the real life was the afterlife, you see. So none of them could agree on exactly how you tapped in to this logos, but they all agreed that the logos existed. And the reason why I talk about this logos is very interesting, because this is exactly the word that John uses when he speaks about his Christmas story. John says, in the beginning. Now we go, we're right back in Genesis. How does the book of Genesis begin? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we see that the way God created was he spoke the creation into existence. His word spoke, let there be light, and there was. John says, in the beginning was the word. But the Greek word he uses here, he could have used other words, the Greek word he uses is this word logos. And the logos was with God. And John is intentionally using this word. He knows that there will be first century Greek philosophers reading this, you see. And the logos was with God, and the logos was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. He's saying, yes, you philosophers out there, there is indeed a divine author to the universe. And yes, there is a single blueprint holding everything together in order and in harmony. I mean, it sounds like a Christmas carol. It's almost like John is singing. And you can hear all these highfalutin Greek philosophers in their ivory towers stroking their beards and saying, "Hear, hear, indeed, we always knew there was a logos." But there would have been a little bit of confusion. John uses the word he. He was with God in the beginning. He's personalizing or humanizing what is meant to be, according to these Greek philosophers, an impersonal force or concept in the universe. And then, if you jump ahead to verse 14, things get really, really crazy. John says what is probably the most outrageous thing any philosopher or religious scholar could ever say. In verse 14, if you look a little bit down the page of your passage, he says, "The Logos became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." This impersonal cosmic concept, this Logos behind the whole universe, just became a personal human being. He just showed up. And he was born weak and smelly and helpless to a poor unmarried refugee family. Just think about how great a leap that is. You can look at the history and trace the evolution of ideas through philosophy and religion. But this idea, the idea of the Logos just showed up as a human, has absolutely no precedent. This is a bolt straight out of the blue. It would have truly made those Greek philosophers choke on their mince pies. It's not rational. It's not self-evident to Greeks or the Jews at the time. And John does a pretty lousy job of justifying his Christmas claim. He doesn't say, "Here are the facts. Here's the evidence. Here's my notes and my calculations, chaps." And he doesn't say, I climbed a mountain and I fasted and I went into a trance and God spoke to me and this is my message. Or I spent years studying the works of Heraclitus or Aristotle. He doesn't say any of those things. No, the only card John has to play is verse 14. He just showed up and he lived among us. He did stuff that we could not imagine in our wildest dreams, but we saw it with our own eyes. And, this idea of Logos becoming flesh completely pulled the rug out from the ancient Greco-Roman world at the time. It turned the Roman Empire on its head within 300 years. You see, the ancients tended to assume, and I think to an extent we assume this today, that if such a thing as God exists, he would have to be discovered by those in the know. They would be the ones to discover God first. And who are those in the know? Well, the priests with reverent ritual sacrifice in temples and cathedrals, or the wise philosophers with their theories, or the kings with their money and their power, or today the scientists with their hadron colliders and their Higgs boson formulas. And yet Christmas turns all that on its head and says, no, you will never, ever find God up there, wherever there is, because he chose to come down here in the mess of the world to find you. Who is the first to discover physically God in human flesh? Not a philosopher or a priest or a scientist. It's Mary, a poor unwed teenager from Nazareth. And she wasn't even looking for him. The implications here are staggering. God is not too high for us to reach. Rather, he's too low for us to stoop. He could be right under your nose and you could miss him. Where are you looking? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. We can also say the darkness has not understood it. What is your favorite Christmas carol? I remember an old vicar of mine saying, "A really great Christmas carol always has the right theology." Charles Wesley knew this well when in 1739 he wrote, "Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn king." I'm sure you've sung the carol hundreds of times. And there's a line in this carol which, you couldn't actually get more sound theology than this line. It says, "Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity." Let me say that again. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. I've got a degree in theology. I know what that means, but very few of us actually know what that means fully. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. But you couldn't get sounder theology than that. One of the most moving moments I've had in a carol service was actually this year, last week at the Jersey Homelessness Outreach Carol Service in town. And I was leading that carol service, and we sang "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" at the end. But we had some special guests that night, and the special guests were the Park Life Choir. And Pierre sings in the Park Life Choir. Thank you, Pierre, because they sang an amazing song. It was a different song. It was called "What If God Was One of Us," originally sung by a lady called Joan Osborne, you see. And when they sung it, I actually had tears in my eyes, because the words of the song are like this: "If God had a name, what would it be? And would you call it to his face if you were faced with him in all his glory? What would you ask if you had just one question?" And the chorus goes, "What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on the bus trying to make his way home." And Joan Osborne grew up as a Catholic, and she wanted to become a Catholic priest, but realized she was the wrong gender. So she became a rock musician instead. And today she'd describe herself as spiritual, but a skeptic. But the question that she poses, is what if God were in our midst? Does God know what it feels like to be human? Does God know what it feels like to be not a king, not a celebrity, not a politician, but just a slob like one of us? And the song was not intended to be a Christmas carol. It was intended to be ironic, but it actually gets about as close to the truth of Christmas as any carol ever got. Just compare the words. Compare the words. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. As you sing that, you probably need to look up. That's what we do with the classical Christmas carol. Or you might want to look down. What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on a bus with no room at the inn. And considering he's born in a stable to an unwed poor girl in suspicious circumstances, which words would you say are more fitting? When Charles Wesley wrote "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," people understood it. But today, less and less do. In verse 4 of this passage that John writes, we read, "In him was life, and the life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Where is this light coming from? Where is this light coming from? When Zachariah and Elizabeth heard about God, they were forced to look not up, but down and face their own rational disbelief. When the shepherds heard about God, they were told to look down in the manger for a lamb. When the wise men heard about God, they were led by the star down to this backwater town village called Bethlehem, not Jerusalem. When King Herod heard about God, he was told about Bethlehem. But his pride and his power stopped him from looking down. He missed the greatest gift of all. When Mary and Joseph heard about God, they were forced to reach down and take care of the baby. That's where the light's coming from. Where are you looking this Christmas? But this light is meant to be life to all mankind, not just those physically present at the birth. How does that work? Again, I ask, where are you looking this Christmas? Did you know the earliest record we have of Christmas being celebrated is around 340 AD? It seems to have come from people being inspired by the acts of kindness of a bishop of Myra in Turkey. His name, you may have guessed this, was St. Nicholas, abbreviated to Santa Claus. He was born to wealthy Christian parents in a place called Patara in Asia Minor. And did you know that the earliest attested and most famous incident from his life was not, interestingly enough, flying across the sky in a big red sleigh with reindeer or wedging himself down a chimney? We think that came later, of course. No, his most famous attested act was to have rescued 3 young girls from being forced into prostitution by dropping a sack of gold coins through the window of their house each night for 3 nights, so their father could pay a dowry for each of them. He could buy them out of prostitution. For Nicholas, it seemed that Christmas was not the 25th of December, but it was every day. And he actually believed that you found God by looking down and serving him in the needs of others, particularly those most vulnerable. And Jesus says, "Whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And the problem is, and I think this is why Christmas can be a bit of an anticlimax for so many of us, the problem is that we spend a lot of our time putting together our own wish lists and waiting for old Saint Nick to show up with his bottomless sack, when he would really want to shout back at all of us, "You go and do likewise." St. Nick was just a guy who loved Jesus and used what he had to show that love to others. This is the week before Christmas. Where are you looking? What are you going to do about it? Amen.